So, John, can you take us back to a particular year where all this got started and why it got started?
Back in 1937, a guy last name is Weeks was sent here to establish the Tuberculosis Sanitarium because it must have been almost epidemic. Provisions for 122 beds. I mean, they don't have any form of recreation. They're in a bed. There's no programming. There's no radio. There's no nothing. And I believe that's where I speculate. I believe it's somebody that was within the Methodist Church decided we should do something about that. And somewhere in there, the idea was born to figure out how to communicate with them up there with a radio signal.
Welcome, everyone, to podcast number 288, Renew Your Mind. With us today, we have a very special guest, John Jenkins. We have our Senior Pastor Kevin Harbin. We have Pastor Jeremy Touroo, and myself, Dana Hall, as the moderator. We've been talking to John about kind of the history of our Gaylord Methodist Church, but today we want to get into a little more history about our church, but also in relationship to John's family. So how it started off is that we just celebrated our retirement of radio ministry. And John was kind enough to look up some history, and he found scrapbooks and a lot of good information. So that's what we want to hear from him today. It is interesting. When I was Googling to find information, our YouTube video on retiring the radio ministry is already part of, if you're looking up Gaylord Methodist Church, right, it's already mentioned in there. And we just did that a few weeks ago. So I thought that was interesting. But John, so when we asked you a little bit about the radio ministry of Gaylord Methodist Church, how did you first, what did you find? How did you pursue that? Yeah.
I knew from reading at a previous time, I knew that I had information on that in my grandmother's and my great-grandmother's scrapbooks. Mm-hmm. So back then, people were savers. They saved everything.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so it was crazy how many scrapbooks. I think there's at least a dozen more that exist, like these two that I have.
Oh, wow.
Well, sure, the generation today only understands how to use their phone.
Yeah.
Because it can save however many creation of folders, albums as you want. But these scrapbooks that you have, it was the only way. Mm-hmm. And thank God that they got preserved. They work.
So tell us who started that brown scrapbook in front of you.
The brown one was started by my great-grandmother.
Mm-hmm. And what was her name?
Her name would be Ella Fox.
Fox. Okay. All right. And then who, after her, continued that scrapbook?
So then my grandmother, it would be Gertrude Jenkins, mm-hmm. Continued. She maintained them, but she possessed them and took care of them. Probably tucked them away in a corner somewhere because eventually, when she passed away, then all that came to my mother. So, and she was a horrific saver of newspaper articles. She was always cutting things out of the local paper and putting it in it's like every basketball game or football game I ever played in and mentioned my name in the newspaper. Those articles are cut out and in different scrapbooks.
Wow, that had to be a tall one.
Yeah, there were a lot of those.
John was a good athlete.
Yes.
There is a good athlete.
But all three of them were savers, and they were writers, and they would take notes. But as you saw, it's like, we know what the date was that something happened, but we wouldn't know what year it was.
Oh.
Well, I did. I found the year. At the very top of the scrapbook page, your great or grandmother put the year on there, and then everything below it, she had cut out the little articles, and there was no date on those. But she had the year.
And your family is notable to our conversation because they were some of the original people to form what we now call the Gaylord Methodist Church, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, they had a lot of different organizations back there, and so my grandparents were also part of a group called the Pioneers of Otsego County. Mm. So they made an effort to gather and to collect information and to further the discussion of history, even for themselves. So I found that was quite interesting. They were interested in their own history.
So here we are. We're doing a podcast. It's called Renew Your Mind, although I think for everybody listening today, it's going to be more informing your mind with things that probably people didn't know. And so, yes, people probably didn't know how rich your family's genealogy is, not just in Gaylord, but in the forming of the Gaylord Methodist Church. But then as we pursued the radio ministry, trying to identify something that we started, but how long ago? Because technologies are changing. And when we began, even before radio, there was something else. And I think we need to kind of remind people how this all got started, this use of communication to reach people who aren't in our buildings. So, John, can you take us back to a particular year where all this got started and why it got started?
Well, that's what I said earlier. It's like you have to sometimes you have to fill in the blanks yourself.
Yes.
And so back in 1937, I found where a guy his last name is Weeks, was sent here to establish the Tuberculosis Sanitarium, because it must have been almost epidemic at times, because there were several of these places around the state of Michigan alone. And so this guy named Weeks was sent here to be a director and to establish it, build it, and I think they made provisions for 122 beds.
Right.
So to have 122 people here at that hospital with tuberculosis, to me, was epidemic size, for crying out loud.
Well, I'll admit, I've never heard of a tuberculosis center. Okay, a sanatorium. Now, Jeremy, you're a generation younger than me, meaning just 20 years younger. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
I have not, till this discussion.
I mean, we've heard of leper colonies, because that's in the Bible, where people needed to be separated from others because of the contagiousness. And that's what you're describing, isn't it? With tuberculosis. A people separated here in Gaylord, Michigan. And how lonely that must have been to be set apart, away from, marginalized from its community.
Exactly. And John, tell our audience, they weren't just from Gaylord. They were from where?
They were from all over Michigan. And there were several of these hospitals built. I mean, if you go out north of town it's still there. It's I think it's 5 stories high. It contains our district courts and our prosecutors' offices, and a lot of the county offices and meeting places are still in that building. And so it was a lot of money that was expended to build that one. And there were others, in reading the articles in the book, there were several others about Michigan. So I don't know how many people at one time would have had tuberculosis, but
so
every once in a while they would actually cure people, and they would be able to release them. And it's like, and we all know there's a gentleman named Gordon Everett that some of us know, that was a businessman here in town, and one of the reasons that he came back to Gaylord was because he was treated so well up there.
Yeah. So tell us, how did the church become involved with that?
Well, I think there was, of course, a lot of employees.
The sanitarium
there, and so I think that they recognized that the people were just warehoused. I mean, they don't have any form of recreation. They're in a bed. There's no programming. There's no radio. There's no nothing. If it's not a nurse or an attendant that comes by to talk to you, there's no interaction with anything. So somebody. And I believe, that's where I speculate, I believe it's somebody that was within the Methodist Church decided, it's like, we should do something about that. And somewhere in there, the idea was born to figure out how to communicate with them up there with a radio signal. And I think they came up with a combination of telephone line and radio signal, and they broadcast in some way to all the people, as they said, in each of their rooms.
Well, John, I love what you just said, and I'm going to challenge maybe anybody listening to this, because I do believe that's the trait of a good Methodist. A trait of a good Methodist is someone who sees something, a hurt, people marginalized or whatever, and says to themselves, we should do something about that. We should do something about that. And then collectively find others who feel the same way. And then what happened?
Yeah.
Once that idea was born, they started talking about doing something that no other entity, especially a church,
Yes.
had ever done before. I mean, it's like we're the only one in the world that decided to do something about that situation by establishing some kind of a radio system so that we could entertain and inform people that didn't have any way to get out and about, to visit, to learn, to go to school, to do anything. They're just warehouse. They're laying in the bed and let someone take care of them.
And there were different rooms. And, John, one day we're going to have to make your scrapbook more visible to people, whether we make copies of it or something so that people can see it, because I had an opportunity to go through some of the stories with you. And as I would, it's like church. What we were doing was taking church to the people at the Tuberculosis Center. And of course, not everybody wants to go to church. And so they would sign up people, do you want the broadcast in your room? And I don't know how many rooms there were, but there would be a time when they might say, hey, we're saying hello to everybody in room 21, the boys in room 21 who said they wanted to hear the ministry from our church.
And don't you think that personalized it to the point where they wanted it to be there every Sunday?
Oh my goodness, yes.
And probably, I don't know, but it may have been other days as well, just entertainment.
Sure.
Because they were putting on skits, things that you didn't have to view. It's like something, like we grew up with in the 50s on radios. There would be story hours and things like that on the radio. You tune in. You could visualize it on your own. You have to use your imagination, for crying out loud, instead of your thumbs on a phone. But
can you tell us a little bit about the Reverend William Morford? He's the Reverend that came up with this idea.
He's the one that was in charge of our church at the time. And if you read all the stories about what he must have gone through, it's incredible. He was an incredible man. To travel the miles that he did, he traveled the whole Saginaw district, the whole Alpena district. I mean, this is back in the 30s, for crying out loud. And he is going, those are long distances to travel back then. And he went to all those places to convince people that this was the right thing to do and to raise money. And he raised thousands of dollars, which is, a lot of money for back then to pull this off. And he was successful doing that.
I read, because there's a million little articles in that scrapbook, but a couple articles that I read, just to emphasize how much work he put into it. It said, Reverend Morford had to reside in X city because he was sick. He was ill. He needed to rest and heal his body. And then there was another one where his dad was ill and he had to go down and take care of him. But it followed his whole life, and all that work that he put into it is just amazing.
We sometimes think of sending missionaries abroad to some difficult living situations. Like I went to Papua New Guinea, where there are no real roads or housing developments, etc. And what you just described in that moment just takes some of us back to try to understand the sacrifice of certain individuals that, again, we'll go back to the trait of a Methodist, saw something that needed to be done and said, we should be doing something about this. He sacrificed at great lengths. Who were some of the other prominent people or things that kind of got us even beyond the tuberculosis now into more of a radio ministry?
I think that the people that were running the local radio station at the time were a big part of it. They had to buy into it as well. So I think that all the churches here in town. There were several. We've always been very wealthy when it comes to churches, and I mean, not wealth money-wise, but in investment in all of our citizens. Mm-hmm. They basically got the whole community behind this program and put it on the radio. And I think once it got out in the radio and was broadcast to our community, which would be way more than just broadcasting to the Tuberculosis Sanitarium.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think people started realizing that if they were unable to get out and go to church, that was something they would tune into. I mean, I talked to someone just yesterday in church who liked listening to that, even though she comes to church all the time.
Really?
She still liked listening to that because if she couldn't make it into church, she knew she could go listen to that. So, like I told her, it's like we didn't end it; we expanded it.
You're right.
You still can get us. You still can get it. You know, we can teach you how to go online to do that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, for some people like myself, born in the '60s, sorry, Jeremy, this is a history lesson for you. A radio is this thing that had this AM and FM dial.
It's got an antenna.
But you go back to a person my age, at least, always remember turning on the radio. There was nothing else. TVs were still, they were being already introduced, but your generation, if I can say it that way, when we talk about people in the 30s, 40s, 50s, that radio was powerful because people listened to it. And so we can only imagine how big our reach was being on the radio. Back in the going back to the 50s, 60s, 70s,
right.
et cetera.
TV showed up in about 1955.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, and what an example of taking innovation or technology and using it to proclaim the gospel to either unreached or isolated people or people far away or people who just want to tune into it. But, you know, the gospel doesn't change, but sometimes our methods of communicating it do, or, you know, and we can use those for the purposes of spreading the message.
The radios were like farmers, just putting seed out there.
Right.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
like
in the tuberculosis, those persons could not come to church.
Right.
There's a number of people who sometimes don't feel like they can go to church. They feel marginalized, much like a person who had a disease. They feel like, I shouldn't be there. And so it's a sad indictment on the church that somehow we don't make people feel welcomed for whatever reason. They've had maybe made some poor decisions in their own personal life or whatever, and they just don't feel like they belong. And so what a beautiful way to be able to take the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, to be able to share it with somebody who hopefully by listening feels like, maybe I do belong. Maybe I can go. Yeah.
It's what we've expanded to with us going online the way we have. I mean, we go away for the winter.
Right.
We don't miss church on Sunday here in Gaylord.
You can go to Florida.
We go to Florida, and Peggy's the whiz with her. She can go through her phone and she puts it right on TV. We get to watch you preaching to us on Sunday.
Yeah.
Jeremy preaching it on Sunday. We still get to participate and watch church. And so it's even better than the radio.
It's visual.
Because it's visual. But we still feel part of everything that we're doing back home.
Yeah.
So it's really nice where we've taken that to.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Good. Well, and I wanted, before we wrap it up, and I'm going to move a little bit away from the radio ministry, but John, like during your lifetime at the Methodist Church, what lessons like were you taught, from those people from the past? Can you tell me that story again about your coach that asked you to usher?
So when I first moved back here, which was like in 1987, there was only one service. And so the pastor at the time and my coach, Jim Monjo, were talking about starting a second service. And so he told pastor, it's like, well, if you'll start a second service, I'll be the usher until we get going.
Now, the second service was an earlier service, right? Yeah.
Which was, some of us wanted. And so he was the only usher. And it was going along just fine. And then he got sick. He got cancer. And so he still hung in there for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And then one day he just said, hey, I've got to go get some treatment, stuff like that. I'm going to be out for a while. Would you take over for me until I get back? So I said, sure, I can do that, Coach.
Oh, my. This is a good reason to do a podcast.
Yeah,
right?
And he, Jim Monjo, I believe the gymnasium at the high school is named after him, correct, John?
It is correct.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, so what John had explained to me is that he asked John if he would usher for him, and just until he gets back. Mm-hmm. And
so 25 years later.
25 years later,
I was still doing it.
Yeah.
So Peggy and I did it for 25 years.
Well, you're still doing it, and so we're grateful for that.
I just thought it was a wonderful story about how people, got...
This is the value of history. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to give a little commercial to those that maybe are listening who do attend the Gaylord Methodist Church or who have lived in the community and want to know more about history. Mm-hmm. We have a wall in our fellowship hall that's had segments of our history there. But history, by just looking at a picture, can evoke stories. And even as John is experiencing right now, it can evoke emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's an emotion of a number of things. Thank God. I'm starting to tear up just thinking about you, John, being asked by somebody, a person of our church's history, to be involved. And how special that is, because I can go back to my own church, time of being asked to be involved. With all that, just to say, there's going to be a wall in our church. Stu Davis, if you're listening, thank you to you, because you were a promoter of putting more pictures that tell the story of our church history. We're just going to do it in a much more systematic way than we have in the past, that it can tell a story. But the reality is that our history only informs our present day, and what we do today will one day be our history.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so people of the Gaylord Methodist Church, get ready, because we are writing history.
Yes.
Even now. And what are we going to add to that wall? Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be good, because God is good all the time. All the time, God is good.
Amen.
There's still a lot of history down in our basement at
I know.
church.
Mm-hmm.
In the library. I know that there's tons of pictures. You're talking about putting stuff up on the wall of people that are probably in their 70s and 80s today, part of our church, that were teenagers back then and Bible school and stuff like that. I mean, they're still down there. Mm-hmm. If someone wants to go dig through them.
We're going to find and some people are digging right now, even as we probably speak, but you don't have enough wall space for all the pictures. So I want people to imagine certain pictures on the wall, but a TV monitor that just keeps scrolling a slideshow of our history, and how beautiful that's going to be. Gorgeous. And our picture will be in there for the year 2026. And somebody in 60 years will say, wow. Look at the hairstyles and the anyway.
Well, John, we just so appreciate you, telling us what you know about our church and how Methodists are out there helping other people and sharing the gospel of Jesus. So thank you very much. Yes. Thank you to our listeners who listen to us. We come to you from the Gaylord Methodist Church. We have 2 services now. no longer an 8 o'clock, but a 9 o'clock. It's a traditional service, and we also have a contemporary at 10:45. We'd just love to have you come and be with us in person. But if you can't, you can view us on Facebook Live or Facebook and YouTube. So if you have any questions, just Google us or call the office, and we'll be happy to help you out. And please listen to our next podcast. Thanks, everyone, for listening.